This is the Toronto Today podcast. I'm your host, Greg Brady.
640 Toronto presents Think Tank. The breaking stories you care about. Facts and opinions that get you through the day. Now, let's meet the guests.
Very excited to talk to these guests today. And, you know, I love being on radio, playing different roles at different times so that listeners can get to know me in different ways. And the same is true of our next guest. I speak with her about real estate every weekend. Develle Morrison, broker with Bosley Real Estate and 640 Toronto contributor. Welcome to Think Tank.
Thanks so much for having me, Ben.
And I butchered his name before, but I'm not going to do it this time. Eric Lombardi, founder of More Neighbors Toronto. Eric, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you for having me, and happy Friday.
Happy Friday. Happy Dry Friday, because we've got to talk about the LCBO right off the top. Officially closed for the next 14 days. 9,000 workers walked off the job at midnight, going on strike, and they said they were going to do it. They stuck to their guns. They have the legal right to do it, but should they have done it? That's the question. Should they have put our summer, our appreciation of responsible alcohol consumption at risk, knowing that they have a virtual monopoly on these things? Develle, let's start with you.
Sure. You know what? I want to say thank goodness they held off on doing the strike till after the long weekend, because, you know, that would have been criminal to me if they started this strike last week. So, you know what? I'm happy they started the strike now. I think it's interesting that during the pandemic, they refused to close down the LCBO because they felt that some of the people who are alcohol dependent would start flooding the hospitals. But so I think it's
Develle, right there, that argument right there that's used speaks to the dysfunctional relationship that this province has with alcohol. We have to regulate it in a way that no other responsible society in the Western world regulates it, and we feel that we're on the right side of this, despite I don't think there's data out there to support that the way we do it markedly makes people's lives more or better as it relates to alcohol consumption. I don't think there's data out there to support it. I'd love to see, and Eric, maybe you can tell me, but do we have a decidedly lower level of drunk driving or alcoholism in this province because of the LCBO? I don't know that data exists.
I don't think that data exists, and I think if you produce that data, I don't think it would tell you that story either. I think most of the research I've seen on alcoholism has shown that countries in Southern Europe, which you can really go get alcohol anywhere, have less issues with binge alcohol and alcoholism than a lot of other countries. And I'm sure that's true of Canada. So the treatment of alcohol is largely a cultural one and not one that's going to be dependent on whether or not there's a state monopoly on liquor sales. Yeah,
and you make a good point there, Eric. I mean, if the things that we prohibit become the things that we covet, and it happens, that's why binge drinking in college, in university in the United States is such a problem, because you're not allowed drinking till you're 21. So you could make the argument, I don't know if there's data to support this, but Develle, you could make the argument that because we are so protective and because we treat it as a social ill that needs to be managed and people need to be protected against it, you could argue that we are putting people in a position where they're going to covet it and seek it out in less healthy ways.
And I would definitely agree with that. I think that that's why Europe doesn't have the problem, because in Europe, you could be 16 out for dinner with your parents and you're going to be served a glass of wine and it's not an issue. But I think the whole way that we do treat alcohol is the reason why there's a binging, right?
Yeah.
So that's a huge problem. But, a couple of things with this strike I've noticed is that, so they're going to close for 2 weeks. And then after 2 weeks, they're allowed to open up 30 stores for Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and then decide to go back on strike again. So I think that is interesting. Now, I actually love the LCBO.
Yeah, me too. I do.
There are literally 3 LCBOs within a 5-minute walking distance from where I live. And so I actually don't need them to be in the grocery stores where we're just going to make the grocery store CEOs get even richer than they already are.
Develle, let me jump in and bring in Eric, because you actually prove my point there, which is they are worried about this potential one day, someday, at some point that they're going to be so weakened by competition that they're not going to exist anymore. That's an existential threat to who they are. And you just proved my point that people have their habits, and it's hard are to break habits. And just because a convenience store offers the sale of some of the things I might want doesn't mean I will ever go in there and get it because I'm used to going to my LCBO. So they are jeopardizing my enjoyment of my summer and my free time as a responsible consumer of alcohol because of the potential of one day possibly losing a stranglehold on alcohol.
Listen, I went to university in Montreal, so I went to school going to the local dépanneur where I could get wine. Mm-hmm. Now, yeah, I could get wine, but also was a university student, so I wasn't more of a wine connoisseur. I just drank anything, right? And so to me, I think, yeah, you're going to serve wine but sell wine in the convenience store. Well, you're not going to get the good quality, vintage, nice wines that I really like to get, right?
Yeah.
But people can still order online, so it's not that you can't get any alcohol. Now, that being said, they tried to have an online purchase system during COVID, and the system fell apart.
It was terrible. I couldn't do it. I actually gave up. Eric, did you? Who do you think this is going to stick to? You know, there's warring sides describing this in completely different terms. But do you think that the black eye is going to fall on the LCBO or the Ford government?
I think it'll be interesting to see where it falls because I'm of two minds of this myself, right? Like, I do think that we need to end the distribution monopoly that LCBO has. That doesn't mean we need to end the LCBO, but it needs to offer competitive services to Ontario. And if other entrepreneurs want to start liquor stores themselves, LCBO still benefits as a distributor. And if you even look at the math for the province, liquor distribution in Ontario was a 2.7 billion business for the province. And if you actually factored the retail presence of LCBO, that number goes down to 2.4 billion, which means that the retail frontage is actually seeing a loss for the province.
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of people understand that we have needed to make this change for some time. I personally think we could have waited until a lot of the contracts expired so that we don't have to pay so much for it. Mm-hmm. But I don't think a lot of people in Ontario are going to fully blame the province for turmoil as a result of a change that was needed.
Yeah.
That said, people are going to want their alcohol, and not everyone has stocked up. And the province made a choice to engage in this fight in the peak of summer.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. I think you're probably right. There's going to be egg on a lot of people's faces. All right, let's transition from provincial news to federal news. I don't think it's any surprise that the Conservative Party has been a monster at raising money over the years. But the Conservative Party, it turns out, also spent far more on advertising last year than other federal parties. Elections Canada posted the annual financial returns for 2023 online, and the Tories spent more than $8.5 million on ads last year. The Liberals spent just a fraction of that amount at around, get this, $381,000, while the NDP spent a whopping $42,000. Now, some Liberals are raising questions about whether it was a strategic mistake not to advertise more heavily and whether there's even now time to change course. Now, clearly the Conservative strategy is working. Is it time for the Liberals to have a bit of a rethink? Eric, what do you think?
Well, I think any Liberal who believes that, spending an extra $1 million or two here or there would have changed the trajectory of Justin Trudeau's party is operating on a set of delusions. Yeah. I think people in Canada are fairly familiar with this government, which has been in power now for 9 years. And so I think what they need to do is understand that they do not have a communications problem. They have a delivery execution problem in which people are not feeling that they're living up to their responsibilities to deliver us a higher standard of living.
Devel,
right? And,
sorry. Well, Devel, I wanted to ask, I had dinner with Pierre Poilievre a few months ago, and I asked him, I said, what happened to the Liberals? They used to be such effective communicators online, whether it be ads or just social media engagement, and they just dropped the ball and you picked it up. And the Conservatives are so effective at it now. What happened? And he said something very insightful. He said, social media is the tool, it's the weapon of the insurgency. And so and so people want it's how the protest voice gets out. And so when you're in opposition, it's a highly effective tool, and it's only effective in government so long as there is buy-in from the people. And now it seems like everything Justin Trudeau posts gets turned around on him now because there isn't a whole lot of love out there for him anymore.
When you're out driving through the countryside this summer, take a second to notice all the cattle grazing in the fields. There's more going on here than you might realize. What you'll see is Ontario beef farmers and their cattle working together to protect pasture land, biodiversity, soil health, and carbon storage. And you're seeing the diversion of food waste. Cattle are the original upcyclers. They eat food not suitable for humans, like imperfect produce or byproducts like corn and grains used for other products, like, for example, making beer. The cattle love these foods. They're high in nutrition and help create a balanced meal while reducing the amount of food waste that would otherwise end up in a landfill. So not only does Ontario beef taste great and provide nutrition for the rest of us, but it's also good for the environment. Want to learn more? Head to ontbeef.ca. That's ontbeef.ca.
Now Our Change honors L.M. Montgomery, along with Anne of Green Gables, the ambitious and inquisitive orphan every generation has embraced as its own. These special edition $1 circulation coins celebrate a timeless storyteller and story, the power of imagination, and the place that Montgomery's PEI holds in our hearts. Find the L.M. Montgomery $1 coin today.
Mm-hmm. I would believe that. I mean, just exactly what the previous person's story. I forgot your name. Was it Mark or Mike? Eric.
It's Eric.
Eric, that's it.
We're all good friends now.
Yeah, it's so early.
Yes, exactly.
Exactly what Eric said about it doesn't matter how much more money these guys would have spent. We know the jig is up. You just wasted $60 million on an app for ArriveCan. And then you gave millions and millions more dollars to some of those same contractors. So it doesn't matter about the advertising spend. So to me, that's really nothing.
Yeah.
But what I do think is interesting is there is a socioeconomic pattern to who follows each one of these parties. So I think that that's something that's interesting, is that you have people who maybe don't have as much money who follow the NDP. People are in the middle of the road who follow the Liberal, and people who are a little bit richer follow the Conservative Party. And so that's, I think, what you're seeing with that advertising spend. So that's something that's interesting to me. The other thing that I would say, so I used to sell media advertising pre to my years as a real estate agent. And I remember having to do ad buys for the Conservative Party. And we were told, make sure that you don't put their ads in shows that featured certain lifestyles. And I thought, this isn't really good if you're telling me that, decorators who, have a specific lifestyle, you don't want to spend ad dollars in those shows. I'm like, so to me, there's a lot more going on with this party.
I don't know if that. I don't know if that would be the case of the Conservative Party in 2024, especially when you look at who is supporting them. They are getting young people. They are getting minorities. They are getting new Canadians. I would not be surprised if. And look, their deputy leader is gay. Pierre Poilievre's birth father is gay. Tristan Hopper, I think, for the National Post. Tristan Hopper pointed out that this could be the gayest Conservative Party in the world in terms of how many.
Don't talk about that. That's what I think is interesting with respect to Pierre's parents, right?
I don't think it's a hot topic of conversation. I don't think it's a focal point. But then again, that also, and Eric, we've gone on a tangent, but I think it's a good one. I don't want to live in a world where we're talking identity all the time.
I don't want to either. I mean, I know there's some criticism of Pierre Poilievre this week just because he didn't do anything around Pride, didn't have a message or even a social media post. And I think that was a little fishy to some people. Like, it really wouldn't have been that hard to acknowledge. But I also think people are tired of some of these issues, not because they don't support them, but because they feel like they're being gaslighted or distracted from talking about systemic issues that really affect their lives.
Yeah.
And I think that's where the Liberals have really created an impression problem where they're all rhetoric and vibes and not
sunny ways,
focused on the matters that actually impact life.
Okay, well, let's switch to, I think, what is an entirely positive story, and I hope you guys see it the same way. But waterfront cyclists can now take advantage of a free bike valet service. So the Waterfront BIA is partnering with Cycle Toronto to offer a free bike valet service starting today through July 15th. So this will allow cyclists to drop off their bike with Cycle Toronto and pick up a bike map. They can enjoy the waterfront, the drop-off spots at Queens Quay West and Reith Street. The service is available from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. For all 10 days of the pilot project. Do we need to see more initiatives like this to encourage people to ditch their cars, feel safe that their wheels won't get stolen, explore the city? It's happening in the summer. Maybe we could expand this to Kensington Market, the CNE, the Budweiser stage in the summer. I just think this is a great way for the city of Toronto to be explored in ways that it should be.
As long as people stay on the bike path on Waterfront.
Yes, Devel.
That I think is fabulous.
Yeah. No, listen, people think I'm anti-bike, and I'm absolutely not. I'm anti-people on bikes who don't know the rules of the road. And you could say the same thing about drivers. But Eric, like this to me, yes, cycling is part of the city, especially in the summer. And here's a project that isn't going to cost the taxpayer a penny. It's going to make cyclists happier. It's going to allow them to get out, explore, ditch their bike, walk around, spend some money, which is what we want, and then go back to wherever they came from on a bike.
I mean, I agree with you that this is a positive news story, at least on the surface. And I would also encourage more of it just because it does make people feel more secure in taking their bikes places. Because I think any person with a personal bike in Toronto knows like bike thefts are a problem in the city, right? So that's where the underlying issue is that I think we're trying to address here, which is, well, people don't feel secure taking their bikes places because of the challenges of rampant bike theft.
Yeah.
And I don't think people feel like the police really have an ear or really care about punishing people who are, profiting off of, frankly, organized bike theft.
Well, Eric, it is
we need to be thinking about.
It is a double-edged sword. I mean, if you're going to have a system where like bike, you can't. There's no effective way to register bicycles in this city, right? And cyclists don't want to do it, and it costs too much to do. And even if you did do it, how would you enforce it? So because of that. And because there's no registration for these bicycles, people can steal them and they just disappear into the ether. But here, I want to change the subject because we've got two housing experts on our panel. So I need to talk about this. With just one vote, Caledon's mayor and council approved 11 developments with open-ended zoning, including some that will double the town's housing stock in the next 20 years and cut through sensitive greenbelt lands. Despite widespread criticism from residents, the Region of Peel, and even the province, who all expressed concerns about the rushed process and the feasibility of the developments. Last Tuesday's vote also raised fears among critics and experts who say the Ford government's overhaul of the provincial planning process has created the Wild West, where developments can be approved with little oversight or study without a development application to inform residents of what was going to be built right next door. Eric, let's start with you. What is your initial reaction to these changes in Caledon?
There's little that Torontonians and people in the GTA like to do more than pearl clutch over the concept of people having places to live. I broadly think that this is a positive development. I actually think more cities should be more forward on pre-zoning land to direct growth and attract it so that we can meet our housing targets. Almost every plot of land in Caledon has conditions on it. Like, are the utilities connected? Right? Have they fully planned a 413 path? So this is all getting ready to build in the future. There are still conditions that developers are going to need to meet in order to allow their projects to go forward. And based on something like this alone, I can tell you the youngest municipality in the GTA 20 years from now will probably be Caledon, because young people my age do not have places to live. And we need housing supply. So I'm fully in favor of this approach. Okay.
Well, Devel, do you agree, or is it too much of a course correction?
Well, I think it's good to approve more housing, land for housing, for sure. I would caution against having housing on the greenbelt. I think we also need to caution how much agricultural land we're turning into housing, because let's say, 20, 30 years from now, climate change kicks in, our climate in this province changes, and all of a sudden we're actually able to grow a lot more than we can now. And then we actually need the food that we produce to feed ourselves, simply because other parts of the world can no longer do it.
Yeah, but Devel, you're forgetting the first rule of politics. You deal with the problem in front of you, not the problem that you're going to create with your solution.
Right. And so I do think that we really do need to proceed with caution. What I do think we need to do when it comes to development is intensify. So instead of this sprawl, which creates the need for more infrastructure, we just need to build higher density where we already are. Yeah. So that way we get the housing that we need. We don't have to spend as much on the infrastructure, and we haven't eaten up key agricultural land that we might desperately need to feed ourselves many, many years from now.
Eric, are we looking at it? Is the ends justify the means? Are the people in Caledon who supported this going to say, look, when we ultimately build and we hit our targets and we do all the things that everybody said couldn't be done, we are going to be proven right? Is that the justification here?
I mean, my opinion on this is, the other caller is also correct, right? We do need to focus on building where we already have infrastructure. The way that we've grown in the past has actually burdened our society with a lot of costs just to repair and maintain it. And that's why it feels like you pay lots of taxes that seem to evaporate, because maintaining this costs a lot of money. Yeah. But when we created the Greenbelt, what governments didn't do is allow intensification. And that's what groups like mine are fighting for cities to allow people to build a fourplex on their property, right? Yep. And so I think it's a very indulgent thing for people who have homes to say, well, this is the last plot of land that someone should use to build housing, protect the Greenbelt, but also I don't want any change in my neighborhood. Yeah, the NIMBYism is a big, big force that has to be combated. Devel, what's the best argument that you have when you hear somebody say, not in my neighborhood?
Well, so I live at Yonge and Eglinton, and I live in a house at Yonge and Eglinton, and there are lots of people in my neighborhood who are upset about the condos going up. But what I have noticed is I have improved services now because of all those condos, right? I've got more grocery stores. I've got a West Elm around the corner. Yep. I've got lots of great restaurants. So for me, I think if people can sort of wrap their heads around that, there are more conveniences for the people that live in the neighborhoods. But, again, if we go back to the whole idea of intensification, if I look at a street like the Danforth, I don't understand why we are just not allowing 20, 30 stories as of right along the Danforth. Yeah, you're right. Because when I look at the commercial strip on the Danforth, I can see all the businesses closing down. And they're closing down because there aren't enough people to shop and use their businesses, which is the same thing that used to happen along Yonge Street at Yonge and Eglinton. And now that no longer happens because of all the condos. Yeah. So to me, let's start with the Danforth and get 20, 30 stories all along the Danforth, have more intensity where we already have transit.
I love it. Well, I love it. Yeah, Eric, the last word on this topic to you.
Well, I mean, that's where it's really important for the province to actually do its job. Things like legalizing housing around major transit stations, which would actually broadly upzone places like the Danforth, have been at the minister's desk for over 2 years now, right? So the province and others can complain about the direction that Caledon is moving in, but the province and a lot of the built-up cities in the GTA have simply not allowed intensification. And now we have a housing crisis, and we need to reconcile that.
All right. In our final few minutes, I want to talk about another highly anticipated political event in the United States. Last week, it was the debate where more people tuned into CNN for that single event than ever in the history of CNN. And now it's about the damage control. President Joe Biden is going to be sitting down with ABC News tonight for his first interview since the debate. And he's been telling Democratic governors he just needs more sleep, and he plans to stop scheduling events after 8 p.m. Now, I don't know if either one of you watched the debate, but I have no doubt that at some point you saw the clips that everyone is talking about. So what do you think Joe Biden needs to do in this interview with George Stephanopoulos tonight that could that will give him the best chance of getting back on track?
Honestly, I hope he fails at the interview. because he needs to go. And so I really hope that he does not do well at the interview, so that the chorus of people telling him he needs to step down increases so much that he needs to actually listen.
All right. Well, tell me what you really think. Eric, what about you? I mean, as far as I'm concerned, the biggest problem, well, it was his performance, but it was the crystallization in a lot of people's minds that they have been lied to for years about something that they knew was happening. And now they're going back and they're saying, well, hold on. This newscaster said this about him. And this newscaster said that he's never been better. I've been lied to. And now we see everything through that prism.
Yeah, I mean, I think people in Joe Biden's team want people to believe, well, yeah, no, he's still up for the job. He's the best person for the job. We can plainly see with our own eyes that he's not the best person for the job. And, they're saying he's the only person who can take on Trump. I'm also not convinced that that's true. I don't think the public is convinced that that's true. And so Biden is building his candidacy on a lie. And while, Trump has also done that many, many, many times over, Biden has a responsibility to Democrats and also to people who actually believe in democracy and are fearing a lot of the signals that are coming from the Republican camp.
Donald Trump has built a brand where his lies are baked into his support. It doesn't matter. Joe Biden's brand is different. And so when a lie comes from Joe Biden, it lands differently. I want to wrap this up. I want to thank both you, DeVell Morrison and Eric Lombardi, for joining me for a great think tank. And DeVell, I guess I'll talk to you tomorrow.
Tomorrow morning. Thanks for having me again.
Thanks so much, guys.
Thanks for listening to the Toronto Today podcast. We drop the highlights of The Daily Show every weekday morning at 11 a.m. Don't forget, you can hear the entire show on the radio, at home, on your smart speaker. Ask Alexa or say, hey, Google, play 640 Toronto or Toronto Today. You can hear us on between 5:30 and 9 weekdays on 640 Toronto. Have a great day.
Being in a Big Brother house is like a dream come true for me.
Mics, cameras, competition.
Are you ready to play Big Brother?
Let's go.
Are you ready
This is big.
for a big summer?
Oh my God, I'm in love.
You lied to my face.
We're coming for you.
I'm gonna burn this sucker to the ground. What a game.
Expect the unexpected.
What a game.
Big Brother, new season Wednesday, July 17th on Global. Stream on Stack TV.